Welcome to the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Brenda. And this is a podcast where we highlight educators who innovate, engage, and inspire through the use of technology. Hi, this is Brenda Argano. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 40 of the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. Wouldn't it be nice if you could get immediate feedback from your students so that you would know right away if they are understanding what you were teaching them? Well, join us as we visit with Kristan Morales from Temecula, California, and learn how she uses Pear Deck in her teaching of math to high schoolers. Kristan and I met at the Q Bold conference, and I just knew we had to bring her on our podcast. So, without further ado, our interview with Kristan Morales. Kristan Morales gave a pretty awesome presentation about a technology that she was using in her classroom with the high schoolers. It's called Pear Deck. And she had so much enthusiasm, and I felt like she knew the students and understood the students, and she was able to get their feedback from them in a very unique way. So I'd like to welcome you, Kristan.
Welcome.
Hello.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, with Kristan, so we were able to kind of catch up, and so our paths have crossed, I think, a few times throughout probably Q history here in California. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey as an educator and kind of where you are today?
Well, I've been teaching 24 years. I've been at the high school level mathematics all that time. About 10 years ago, I started my master's program in educational technology, and it was the beginning of a new direction. It was prior to the advent of Common Core. So with my master's degree in educational technology, I felt like I had a whole new beginning of my career. That coincided with my classroom getting actual more technology. I had a smart board installed in my classroom, and then shortly thereafter, my school got some Chromebooks. So with that, I feel like although the math hasn't really changed, the combination of technology and Common Core instruction, the delivery and the conceptual understanding of math grew deeper. And I think a lot of the tech tools that I was learning helped support that deeper understanding and conceptual understanding that was really required for the Common Core mathematics.
That's awesome. So just to be clear, math did not change, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Sometimes I see that on Twitter. This math has changed. And I'm like, math is still math. Pretty sure, yeah. As a former math teacher, pretty sure I can explain it. But we're asking students through the Common Core to dig deeper, to explain their learning, to do more active reasoning, to do more engaged learning with the concepts. And so I'm a big fan of Common Core math. So here you are. You're at Q Bold, and you're giving this amazing presentation, which Brenda attends, and because we divided and conquered at Q Bold. And so she comes back to me super hot on we have to get Kristan on the podcast. She's talking about Pear Deck. She knows her students unlike any other person I've ever heard talk before. And so we pretty much booked you that day. I think we reached out to you shortly thereafter, and
Awesome.
There was you and a couple others. So tell us a little bit about how you're using specifically Pear Deck. That's what we want to talk about today is Pear Deck. How you're using Pear Deck in your classroom, in your math classroom.
Pear Deck is really, the way I use it primarily is to create whole class conversations. So it's for me, I use it primarily as a collaboration tool. I use it really, you can take any type of, let's say, set of math problems that you are normally going to be doing some direct teaching on and actually turn them into a classroom conversation. So it's really that simple. So Pear Deck is like a Google Slides tool, right? So you can create your whole Google slideshow and then open up Pear Deck, and then that's what makes it interactive. Mm-hmm. So on the students' end, what they're seeing is your Google Slides that has your math problems on it, or the situation, the word problem, whatever it is. And then you're allowed to toggle between basically just text response. So I can ask a question to the whole class and students will respond right away. So this is different. In math class, like you said, you were a former math teacher. You probably had those little whiteboards, in math class, how every kid has their little mini whiteboard. And you would hold up your whiteboard. Well, what I noticed over the years with the whiteboards is that students who were not feeling as confident about their results would kind of look around the room. They would wait for other students that they're like, ooh, there's the smart, there's Brenda. Oh, there's the smart girl. Oh, we're going to write and copy down whatever Brenda writes. Okay.
They never said that, by the way.
I'm just using the example. But you know how the students will do that. They'll rather than giving their authentic voice, they'll wait and hold, till they feel the smart kid answers, copy what the smart kid does, and then hold their board up. So what I found with Pear Deck is I can do the exact same routine where I throw a question out there, but because the students do not see the responses until I reveal them, I get authentic responses from students. Now, you got to lay down a foundation of class culture of mistakes are okay. We just want to hear what you have to say. We're not going to judge if you're, let's say, right or wrong. So students feel comfortable knowing that really whatever they put up there is meaningful and valid. But with the Pear Deck, you can get those responses like almost instantaneously. Most of my classes have 35 to 38 students. And when you call on students individually, that takes quite a bit of time. Even if you're only doing 30 seconds to 1 minute per student, that would take, 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how big your class is. So with Pear Deck, you get those responses instantaneously, and the students cannot see what the other kids are saying until you reveal it. So that's a really big plus for me as a teacher, because I can crowdsource and get student input like almost instantaneously, and I can get authentic input.
So what type of questions are you asking them?
Well, it really depends on the day and what we're learning in math class. I like to use Pear Deck really with anything I want students to analyze. So when I want the why, in math class, kids seem to focus on the answer when there's a lot of thinking that goes on from getting the problem to doing the problem solving to getting the final answer. There's a lot of steps there. And I want to know, what was your method? What, if I'm doing geometry, I want to know what theorem or rule or definition were you using? How did you arrive at your answer? Because in typical math classroom situations, there's more than one way to solve it. So what I really want them to say when I'm using Pear Deck is, what was your thought process? So I use it as a way for students to document and share their thought process, which, with Common Core, we have the 8 mathematical practices, and we're talking construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Well, Pear Deck really allows me to do that, because now you're going to see the reasoning of other students. You're going to get to critique it and say, yes, I agree with that, or no, I did it a different way. So in terms of some of the things that teachers are being asked to do with the Common Core in math class, I think, especially in the area of constructing viable arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others, Pear Deck's a perfect tool for that.
I would agree. And so for those people who don't know what Pear Deck is, you said it's an opportunity for us to take a Google Slides presentation, import it into Pear Deck, and then use it to engage students on their devices. So they see the Pear Deck, they see your slideshow presentation, but you're also able to put in, like you were saying, questions, but there's so much more that it does.
Oh, yes.
And so you're not only asking them questions, but you might be asking them to graph something, or you might be asking them to, agree or disagree with a statement. Tell me how else you're using it.
Well, just like you said, like you can do like thumbs up, thumbs down. Again, they have draggables in Pear Deck. So we've, every teacher's done, hey, give me a thumbs up. Well, again, kids are hesitant to give the thumbs up because they don't feel confident in their answer. They kind of look around, and if everybody's doing thumbs up, oh, I guess the answer must be thumbs up. Whereas in Pear Deck, you have draggables. So you say, hey, give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down. And then you reveal to the class. Then you get, again, authentic responses. And there's other things you can do with the draggables. Maybe you want to connect things up. They also have a drawing tool where, like you said, graphing. You could have, a coordinate grid in there, and you can say, hey, graph the equation, graph the line y equals 3/2 x minus 7. And then you can start to see where the errors are occurring, rather than having to walk around to each kid, you can just display it. Now, another thing that's great about Pear Deck is you can put it to be anonymous. Mm-hmm. So if your kids are not feeling comfortable, you can just say, oh, look, a student in class did this. Talk about it without having to call the students out. Right. And I think that makes the students feel a lot more comfortable, because then, they're not getting singled out.
Right.
And again, I start my year off with Joe Bowler, growth mindset, how, your brain's a muscle. When you make a mistake, there's more synapses firing in your brain. So your brain's actually growing more. So we're like, my brain just grew. So my students kind of feel that way. To get authentic results from students, you really do need to set up a culture in the beginning that this is what you expect of them, and it's okay. No matter what you say, right or wrong, your thought process matters. So Pear Deck allows me to do that. There's, like I said, a lot of different tools in Pear Deck. I also used it with 3-act math. So I think, Brenda, that's the one that you saw on me present. So you can embed a Google video, maybe show a quick video clip, and then you can ask questions about it. So that's when I'm doing 3-act math, I'll preface the 3-act math situation with some introductory type slides, like, hey, what do you think? Or give me an estimate. There's a number tool. So when kids give you an estimate, it gives you a number line. So maybe the estimate, you can see the range of the estimate from 5 to 1,000 or whatever it is, right? So there's a lot of tools that you can utilize in Pear Deck and that I use when I'm doing 3-act math that are along the lines of getting, videos, number lines, thumbs up, thumbs down, written response. But the key for me, the biggest one, is explain your reasoning. So kids know that that's the important part here. And it's also getting them to value multiple solutions to math problems.
And when you come across teachers, because I'm sure you do, I always like to present the teacher that's but this is the way I like to teach math. So when I started teaching math pre-Common Core, I stood in front of my class and I went over how we do everything on the board. We had whiteboards. It was new back then in the day. I explained it all on the whiteboards. I was like, you take notes in your notebook, and then I'm going to go over everything, and I'm going to talk a lot at you, and then I'm going to do notebook check, and then we're going to take a test. And that was pretty much the cycle. And after about the first 2 times when they were bombing the tests, I was like, wow, I'm messing something up. And so what do you say to teachers where it's they have to see me do it? I have to do it on the board, or I have to give them this kind of direct lecture introduction, and they have to write it down in their notebooks. What do you say to those folks when it comes to kind of asking them to shift their practice to potentially use something like Pear Deck?
I'd say keep doing what you're doing, and every so often throw in Pear Deck. Okay, I agree. I'm a math teacher. I've been a math teacher for 24 years, right? Kids do need the practice of, the algorithms, doing the actual mechanics of solving, an algebraic equation and whatnot. Okay. But after you have done a couple days of that, possibly, or however long it takes, then why not give them a chance to see what they know? They're ready at that point. They are ready at that point to try an unapplied word problem, or to explain their thinking, or even just do the same problems and have them explain their thinking.
Right.
So it doesn't need to be every day. It could be start small, start once a unit, and see how it goes. And if teachers, I know at my school, we're not a one-to-one Chromebook school. Okay. So if you don't have Chromebooks, Pear Deck works on cell phones. Okay.
And so everybody's got in high school has a cell phone.
Yeah. And then here's another thing too. If you don't feel comfortable having the students have their cell phones out, you could do share a Chrome cart with another teacher. A lot of times I'll do that with Pear Deck, where I intentionally have them work with a partner. Okay. So I have them collaborate with their elbow partner and then take turns typing in, but it's actually two people. So I'm getting, the response of two people. So it's, if teachers also are afraid, like, hey, this is going to isolate the kid by themselves, then just do it one for every two kids or even one per group. And then that's going to force a conversation between those pair of students or those, group of 4 students, because they're going to have to, as a group, type something in. And when I do it like that, I always tell them to rotate. Okay, on the first problem, student A, you're doing the typing. On the second problem, it's student B. Okay, now you're doing the typing. So they're being forced to actually write something and talk to their partner about it. So it's just another way to use it.
Yeah, which also meets standards, some collaboration standards and thought process, and all the some of the 4 C's are being met there as well. I like that.
There's one other tool, like Pear Deck also has a thing called Flashcard Factory, which Flashcard Factory is where you can have a list of vocabulary words, and then the students have to work in pairs to define that word and draw a picture with it. And that works really well with math, especially like, in my opinion, geometry or graphing or anything that's got a visual with it. You could throw out a word there, maybe, parallel lines or something along those lines. The kids could define it in their own words, and then their partner draws a picture to go with it. So I could see, different groups of kids doing a variety of different equations, because there's, of course, infinitely, different sets of parallel lines. They create a flashcard with it, and then those flashcards get presented to the class, and the teacher gets to give the stamp of approval. So now their flashcards are getting displayed to the whole class. And as a class, they could say, hey, that looks like a good flashcard. That definition, that drawing is a good representation of the vocabulary word. Or maybe now a class discussion comes up and says, hey, maybe that's not a good definition of the word, or maybe that example doesn't quite work. What's really neat when you use Pear Deck Flashcard Factory is once you approve the class's deck, it automatically exports to Quizlet.
Oh, nice.
Kids made their own flashcard deck that you could post in Google Classroom or on your school website to use to help study.
Right.
So now it's student-centered. It's student-created work as opposed to, teacher-created. So that's another really neat thing you can do with Pear Deck.
I love that. I love to tell teachers, work smarter, not harder. That's one of my mantras, is that once the students create and have displayed that knowledge, then as a teacher, you're not creating that slide deck. You're not creating that study guide or whatever. They're coming up with it, and they own it now. And that's huge.
When they create their own, they understand it better.
For sure.
Yeah, so much more powerful.
Right.
So Pear Deck, I think really you said works with Google Slides, but in my experience, I've also been able to take old PowerPoint, if I had PowerPoint presentations, and upload them, and it converts them automatically.
Correct.
And there's all kinds of different activities that you can push out. One of the things you said was one-to-one versus group work. I'm thinking about, what about a blended learning, a station? I work in stations in my classes, let's say. Could Pear Deck be its own station? Like, could it run independently without you?
I've never tried that, because as a teacher, when you run a Pear Deck session, you kind of Pear Deck takes control of the kids' Chromebook. So as you advance your slides, the kids, it creates the pacing for the student.
Got it.
So, maybe you could ask my friend, like Susan Casey from Pear Deck, if there is a way to do that. I've never actually done that, but maybe there is a way to auto advance. But that one of the nice features of Pear Deck is when you are in front of the classroom, you do control the slides. So the student cannot advance further in the slide deck, which is really nice for math teachers, because what I'll do is I'll lead up to a question, and particularly when I'm doing a 3-act math, the final video is the final reveal. I don't want them to see the answer before they work on it, right? So that part of Pear Deck is really beneficial when you are leading up to a big aha moment, because they're not going to see the aha moment until you get them to that slide, because the teacher's in control.
Got it.
Another thing I want to say about Pear Deck that is really, really powerful, back to your question about the teachers like, well, I don't do it that way, or, hey, I use my whiteboards. Why can't I just use my whiteboards? The one thing about the classroom questioning tool when you're using Pear Deck is it saves the students' responses. And then at the end, you can publish that in Google Classroom and ask the student to go back and reflect on it. When you're using a whiteboard, it gets erased, every question.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I know as a high school teacher with 200 students, I have a kind of a gut reaction or a gut feeling about how it went, but I don't remember all the small details of what everybody said. Now with Pear Deck, I get to save the deck. So I can go back, after school or during my prep period and review what the students said, right? And maybe bring what one student said or a trend that I saw with a variety of students. Maybe it's a misconception. Now I can reread that during my prep period and then say, hey, the next day in class, hey, I noticed a lot of people, were saying this misconception. Let's clarify. Let's revisit this. So it allows me as a teacher to revisit the material in a way that was previously inconceivable with the whiteboards, right? Additionally, because I can export that for the student, now maybe that's the student's homework.
Right.
Now the student can go back and remember what they said, and it automatically does that for you, right? It generates it and exports it into Google Classroom. So that's another tool that I think is superior to what I did, prior to the technology.
Well, and I think any time you can make a data-informed decision in your practice, and you can make it in the moment or slightly after the moment, immediately, you've changed your trajectory as an educator. I think. I think that's huge. And I was actually going to ask you about data. So it collects data through each slide deck, and it saves, as I recall. And I haven't used Pear Deck in a while, but it saves like instances. So if I were to run this, let's say you teach multiple classes, but the same section. If you were to run it in period 1 and then again in period 2, because you're teaching the same class but different sections, it would keep data separate, right?
Yeah, all you have to do to keep it separate is open up a new session. And that's exactly what I want to do, because I do want to keep it separate. When I post to Google Classroom, the way I have my Google Classroom set up for high school is, there's a period 2, a period 3, a period 4 Google Classroom. So when I run Pear Deck, I run each period as its own session so that afterwards I can export that period to that period's Google Classroom. Yes, I keep them separate, and then that allows me to kind of look at each period separately.
Awesome. I love data. I love when apps collect data.
And I love the fact that when you're doing this actually in the classroom and on the big board, and everyone can see everyone's answers, and you can see 20% of the class answered this way and 80% of the class went that way, or individual answers, that I can still be anonymous as a student, that I don't feel like I'm afraid to answer because I don't want to be wrong.
Well, and 2, there are, every teacher knows that in most classrooms, there's maybe just a handful of kids that do like to talk, that like to dominate the classroom. And if you allow it, they will. They'll just override everyone, and the quiet, more shy kids will be like, just let that kid talk. They're fine.
Right.
But the thing is I want to give voice to all my students, especially the quiet ones that have good ideas that never speak up. Pear Deck is going to require that they give their voice. And so unlike a regular classroom conversation, I get everyone's voice.
Right.
And that's what's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that's where, without that data, you could have walked away from a class and been like, oh yeah, everyone understood that. Pretty much everybody grasped that concept, because your enthusiastic students, the ones who always are kind of dominating the conversation, and let's say there's 5 of them in a class of 30, that's all you're gonna hear, right? So as a teacher, you're gonna walk away and be like, yeah, they got it. Honestly, that's how it was with me. I was like, oh yeah, they got it. And then they take the test and I'm like, they don't got it. They don't, I did something wrong. I mean, I really owned that as like, I failed them because they couldn't grasp that concept.
Yeah. And then I've used Pear Deck too for like Common Core prep and tried to kind of set up the slides to mirror the way Common Core testing, like the draggables.
Mm-hmm.
You could use that for like select all that apply. You know, there's ways that you can set it up really to mirror a lot of the things that the kids are being asked. Because here's the deal, in math, there is a lot of draggables on the Common Core test, right? Where they have to drag a dot to a point and whatnot. How do you create that without some sort of technology? So there's ways to use Pear Deck to help you set up Common Core practice and make it feel like they're doing a Common Core test when, of course, they're not. Because, you know, as a teacher, there's not that many release tests. I mean, there are, but you've probably already done that. And you probably want to get some practice on a smaller scale with, you know, when you start whittling down your standards and your units, maybe you want to create something that's a smaller test. Well, you can create things that feel like a Common Core electronic test by using the tools in Pear Deck. So that's like another way to utilize it.
And so have you used this for actually quizzes or tests?
Well, the thing is you'll be able to see what the students are doing and give them the same experience without actually, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because in math, there are these like draggables that you need to do. So it allows them to feel that same experience. Also, you know, you can set up in Pear Deck, you can set up multiple choice questions and use it like a gaming situation where they can choose like A, B, C, or D, or select all that apply. So you can set that up in Pear Deck as well. So there's like I said, a variety of tools from just text responses, draggables, graphing, multiple choice, draw a picture, which drawing a picture too is also really useful in math if you want to draw out a graph or a geometric shape or a geometric diagram.
Have you tried to use this as far as any like SAT prep or ACT prep? Or do you see a way to use this for that?
Well, I haven't personally tried it. I really think a teacher, once they determine the functionality that's going to best serve their needs, they could have Pear Deck do it for them. You know, so I'm sure there's enough tools in there that you could set up anything that you want. But I don't focus on SAT prep directly. I focus on good math instruction, which in turn should allow students to do well on the SAT.
And so teachers who are like, yes, the Pear Deck sounds really exciting. I want to get started with it. You know, they're listening to this podcast. They go to peardeck.com. They can sign up for free and get started and go. But there's actually, it's a freemium subscription. So there's a free version, there's a paid version, and then there's a district school version. I would imagine that you're either using the district school version or the annual type individual premium subscription. And there's some differences, and I would imagine it's in the amount of Pear Decks you can have or data collection or something like that. The big difference is the free version is only anonymous. Oh, got it.
The paid version, you could have it be anonymous or show the students' names. And then also with the paid version, you can post into Google Classroom. But the free version works really well. I mean, I personally, because part of my math class, students have to get quote unquote presentation points. That means they're like presenting ideas to the class. So I like the premium version because I have the students' names attached to it, and students know when they're responding in Pear Deck, they're getting like presentation points in my class. So I like that aspect of it. But the free version anonymous is a great place to start as well. You're going to get a lot of functionality there. And what's nice is when you're on the Pear Deck website, they have a lot of, how-to videos. Mm-hmm. So I think it's simple enough that a teacher who has made a Google slideshow before could easily turn it into a Pear Deck slideshow. And they have, like I said, the how-to, videos. So there's a lot of help built in on the site to make it pretty simple to use.
Yeah, it looks like even just adding an extension or an add-on right into Google Slides allows you to take it and start putting in the activities, I guess.
Yeah, and Pear Deck has a lot of pre-made templates, so you can just start real simple. Just use one of their, if you're starting with a blank Google slideshow and you want to just use one of their templates, their app, you can just drag in one of their templates. So it's pretty simple to get started. And then, as you get more experience, then you could get a little bit more fancy and make your own slides and whatnot.
And how would you say, so we have a lot of teachers that are teaching like special education. They might be at various stages with students in diverse learning methodologies. How have you seen Pear Deck, especially in your math class, meet the needs of our diverse learner population?
Well, in all of my classes, I have resource, special education students in them, anywhere from 10 to 20% of the class. And one thing I think is important for those types of students is, one, to have access to the information. Like I said, when I'm done with Pear Deck and I post it in Google Classroom, they can go back over and see all the slides. I also think it gives them voice in the conversation. Again, some students just don't feel like they have a voice, and it gives all students a voice. So I think a lot of the things that are there are great for all students, but especially for SPED students, as access to the curriculum and giving a voice in the conversation. Also, as I mentioned, on the teacher end, you're going to be able to go back and have each student's response. So if you want to take that to an IEP meeting, if you want to share that with a case carrier or a parent, now you actually have some evidence of what happened in the day. Mm-hmm. Say, hey, this is how your student responded.
And it was great, or it was right on point. Usually you're going to those IEP meetings with like, this is what's deficient, and you can actually go in and be like, this is what was great. It was right. You could switch the conversation a little bit because you have more data now. I love it.
And so each student signs up for an account, or is this through Google?
Now, actually, Pear Deck has a Microsoft version too. So if your school's not a Google Apps for Education, they can still use Pear Deck. My school's always been Google, so I know a lot about the Google version with their original. And but now, Microsoft schools can use it too. So when you're at a Google Apps for Education environment, the students just log in with their Google account. Nice. So I would assume in the Microsoft environment, it's the same way. They don't need a Pear Deck account. They just log into the session.
Makes it so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like, I'm looking on the website right now, it looks like they would log in with their Office 365 account. It integrates, teacher dashboard integrates with your PowerPoint slides, mm-hmm. as well as Microsoft Teams, which is a nice collaboration space as well. So it looks like it's interacting almost identical to the way it does in the Google space. So, which is great. Good job, Microsoft.
Yeah, I think that came out last year. I think it's like less than a year old.
That's awesome. And again, there's an add-on that goes into the PowerPoint online, just like there is with Google Slides. So beautiful. I love Pear Deck. It came out after I was done teaching, but I had been using it in presentations and showing our teachers how to use it. And I will continue to do that.
Well, you can use it remotely. So if you're in a blended online environment, or maybe a homeschool environment or let's say, like at our school, we have like a virtual academy where the students could do, check in with their instructor. You can, send out the link to everyone and they can come in remotely. We don't all have to be in the same classroom to be a class. Right?
Yeah, no, that's, you know what, you said something that just reminded me that I think one of our professors at LMU is doing that in their online classes.
Really?
Is using Pear Deck during their lecture. I use that word pretty loosely, but we're all on Zoom, like we are recording this now, we're all on Zoom, and then the presentation gets pushed out. And I remember joining one of those classes, and I was like, wow, this is cool. And you're right, they weren't even in the same city, let alone... some of them even probably weren't even in the same state, and they were all getting, the introduction to the concept through Pear Deck. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I love it. Yeah. And it looked like it was about $149 for the premium version per year. Not horrible, something that either hopefully could be accounted for on the teacher's budget. teacher budget. But some schools give teachers some stipends and things like that to cover costs of stuff like this.
Yeah, and I think if your district covers it, it's a lot cheaper as a district. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go, districts. Get on this. If you're a Microsoft district or a Google district, get on it.
Yeah.
So what's the feedback from the students?
You know what? One thing, as we started this interview, and I was telling you about when I started my master's program in educational technology, I feel like it just added more tools to my tool belt of teaching. And anytime you switch it up and do different stuff, kids get bored.
Right.
They don't want to do the same thing all the time. Okay, so if you can have just another way for them to interact with the information and share out with the class, students love it. I do think that, like I said, because now students that normally didn't have a voice do have a voice, and they're getting to see what other students are saying in class. I think they really like it. So I definitely, couldn't live without it anymore. I love Pear Deck. I love this. It's one of my go-to classroom conversation tools. And students really, I think, enjoy anytime you give them opportunity to have a voice, to share their ideas. I think it's going to be a win for the students and a win for you, because then you get to hear what they have to say and they get a chance to say it.
Well, I got to tell you, when I was in your session, I by no means am a math whiz. I'll be very blunt about that. And even though I was in a classroom with 30 people that I did not know, nobody knew who I was, I still felt like I didn't want anybody to know my first name, right? So when you just posted everything and honestly, that just made me feel a little bit more comfortable giving my answers. And to me, I think that's hugely important for people who are afraid to be wrong. You have those students that don't want to make a mistake ever. And if they do make a mistake and nobody knows about it, I think that just makes it a little bit easier for them.
Yeah, definitely. And then chances are they get a little bit more out of the learning. And you get a little bit more insight into them, which is awesome.
When they realize that they're not the only one that maybe made the mistake, right? Exactly. If there's 20% of the class over there, you're like, I'm not the only one who doesn't understand this concept, and she's going to cover it, or she's going to assign me some personal homework or whatever at the end of the day. No, I think it. When we were talking to Ed Campos Jr. and he was talking about math anxiety, just this is one thing. It's one more thing that we have that we can help alleviate math anxiety. And we don't want kids to hate math. Right. I don't want kids to hate math. I don't want my kids to hate it. I want them to love it and want to try to problem solve and figure things out, because quantitative reasoning, I call it computational reasoning. Like, it's like the fifth C. That's what I think is like creativity, communication, critical thinking. I think that we should add computational reasoning into there, and how to understand and interpret math and numerical sense. And if they have anxiety about it because of an experience in class, we've blown that off their radar.
Well, and to the students, when you give them a chance to do a rich math problem, a rich math task, okay, and they're going to be tested on math tasks when they take the Common Core test. It's not just individual mechanics. It's math tasks. They need to realize that great mathematicians spent hundreds of years trying to figure out math problems and made a lot of mistakes along the way. And by the time they see the theorem or the formula, it looks perfect. But it wasn't perfect to begin with.
Right.
It was a big mess. Okay. And that's what math is. When you're trying to solve stuff, you might come at it from all directions, and then ultimately you clean it up and say, okay, this is the best way to do it, or this is one of the ways that is the quickest or the easiest. But it still allows students to validate all of those methods, and all of those methods sometimes lead to a final solution. So any chance that you give them to say, hey, I was part of that, my 2 cents helped contribute to the big picture, I think it lets them know that math is not a perfect science. When you're trying to solve a real life situation, a real word problem, it's going to be messy, and maybe the math model won't fit it perfectly, but we're still going to use it as a way to make sense of the world around us, right?
Awesome.
And I like what you said, Brenda, knowing that other students in class might be making that mistake and actually getting to see that anonymously on the Pear Deck screen. That's like comforting. Like, hey, they said they were thinking the same thing I thought,
And that also gives you clues of maybe I need to refocus, right, on and stress more one step of the problem or whatever that is that people are struggling with. I think that's so nice that you have that feedback so quickly.
Yeah,
it's huge. So you mentioned Jo Boaler earlier in the episode, and so she's great. We love Jo. What is a book? Again, a lot of teachers listening to this podcast, new teachers, veteran teachers, looking for something that you've read, that you've sunk your teeth into, that you just really, really love, that made an impact in your life or your career. What do you recommend?
Well, definitely anything from Jo Boaler is good. You're like, what's math got to do with it? Or any of her books have some great math tasks and strategies and protocols to deliver that to the class, especially visual pattern problems that has multiple representations and avenues to arrive at a solution. I also love Edgy Protocols by John Hebron. Because, as a teacher, no matter what it is that you teach, you're always looking for new ways to switch it up, new activities. And if you want some activities, Edu Protocols has them for you. I mean, there are so many ways to slice and dice the curriculum and to make it feel like a routine that you do in your class. And then once the students learn the protocol, it becomes a routine and you can layer in any new standard or any new piece of information. And I use that with technology too. One of my favorite ones is the Fast and Curious.
Love that one.
Which I use with quizzes. So I love the Fast and Curious with quizzes because I can put information in a quizzes on Monday, see what they know, get the data, and then focus in on the problems that they did the worst on, do some intervention on that the next day, direct intervention, and then take the quizzes again and guarantee the scores go up. So anything that is fun for the kids and gets me data to intervene to stop mistakes is good. So I highly recommend Edu Protocols. Also, Routines for Reasoning from Grace Kellermack.
Mm-hmm.
That's an awesome book and a lot of great routines for math class, to questioning routines, and Making Sense of Math with Clothesline Math by Chris Shore. Love Clothesline Math. So if I had to recommend any books, it would be those four: Edu Protocols, Routines for Reasoning, Clothesline Math, and What's Math Got to Do with It by Jo Boaler.
Nice.
Great.
Nice list.
It's a good list. Way to go. Our math teachers are going to be excited.
Yeah.
Holiday reading.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Are you going to be presenting anywhere? Or
I am going to be presenting at Spring Q. I'm going to be presenting Pear Deck 3-Act Math.
Oh.
So if people want to see me at Spring Q, I'll be in Palm Springs, and I'd love for them to stop by my session.
Awesome.
We'll be in Palm Springs with you.
We'll
see
be
you
stopping by.
Let's have a cup of coffee.
Let's do it. We got to take a IRL picture.
That's right.
We're in real life. And so Spring Q. So let's talk about Spring Q. So you're part of the Spring Q planning team. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm on the planning committee. I'm the volunteer coordinator. I'm on the planning committee, and I'm also the volunteer coordinator for Spring Q.
And Q is?
Computer Using Educators.
We don't call it that anymore.
No, right. It's become more of just Q because, I think last 2 years ago was our 40th anniversary.
Wow.
And when Q started, that was a thing, Computer Using Educators. But as it evolved over the years, it just became Q because, of course, everybody uses computers in some form or another in the classroom nowadays.
Right.
But it could be an iPad, it could be a phone, it could be, it doesn't matter what your device is. It's more of digital, but we didn't want to lose the historical value of Q.
Yeah. And when I think Q, I really think inspired learning is really what it is. It's inspired, innovative teaching. So if you want to get inspired and have fun, you go to Q because You're going to learn something new. It's going to be inspiring and innovative. And I guarantee you're going to want to do it when you get back on Monday in your classroom.
Right.
And if you haven't already, those of teachers, especially in California and Nevada, are interested in looking up CUE, it's CUE.org. They have a fall conference
in Northern California,
up near Sacramento, and then we have a down in the LA, Palm Springs area, Southern California area. And you're, as the volunteer coordinator, are you looking for any volunteers this year?
I sure am. Yeah. What I'll do is I have like a Google form that interested people can fill out, and if the way it works basically is you work volunteer 6 hours. And then you get complimentary registration for the conference.
That's amazing.
It's pretty amazing. And you know what? What's always, from my point of view, when you're volunteering, you're like in the know. Mm-hmm. Right. You know what I mean? You're on this side now. So you get like a unique opportunity to really see the conference from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. So I think it's not only getting complimentary registration, but feeling like you're part of it because you are working the conference. You're a conference volunteer. So I'll give you a link to a Google form, and anyone who's interested, they can fill it out, and I'd love to be in contact with them.
That'd be awesome. We'll definitely include that in our show notes. And we'd love to see any of our listeners at CUE as well. We just think it's one of the best conferences in California, and we're happy to be a part of it. We were last year during Spring CUE, we were the official podcast of CUE, so we were tweeting out a lot of cool things during that time frame, which we will do again this year as well. Kristan, thank you. Oh, how do we get a hold of you?
Yes.
How do our listeners, if they want to ask you more questions or whatever, how do they do that?
You can connect with me on Twitter at Kristan Morales 1. My name's spelled just slightly different from other Kristan, so just go ahead and put it in the show notes, but it's at Kristan Morales 1.
We will definitely do that.
Perfect.
Thank you. And so thanks again for your time today. I think we appreciate. You'll see some of our listeners in your session at Spring CUE, and love talking about math. Love talking about Pear Deck. Love talking about 3-act math. Right, 3-act math. Mm-hmm. I love talking about that, and we hope to maybe have you back on another episode someday.
Yep. Awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you, and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it was great talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll see you soon.
All right.
Thanks.
And
we're out. Thanks for listening to the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. If you have enjoyed listening, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or send us some feedback on our website, mytechtoolbelt.com. We would love to hear from you. This will help us deliver the content that you want to hear. Thanks. And we're out.